Hello everyone. Today's topic of discussion is sunscreens. We know that as dermatologists, we need to prescribe sunscreens quite often to our patients for various indications. And hence, in-depth knowledge about sunscreens is a must for us. We should know about the various ingredients, the various components to look for while prescribing a sunscreen to our patients. But before we go and study about sunscreen in detail, we should first learn about the UV radiation. Because what is the ultimate purpose of sunscreen? So sunscreen, it is a source of topical photoprotection and it protects our skin from the harmful effects of the UV radiation. So what are the different types of UV radiation? There are three types of UV radiation: UVA, UVB, and UVC. If we talk about the sea level, at sea level, approximately 95 to 98% of UVA is received, and only about 2 to 5% of UVB is received. It is assumed that the ozone layer it attenuates maximum amount of UVB and it completely absorbs the UVC radiation. But as and when the ozone layer will get depleted, more amount of UVB and UVC will be received at the sea level. But as of now, around 95 to 98% of UVA and only about 2 to 5% of UVB reaches the earth. Basically, we are making a measurement at the sea level. If we talk about UVA, the wavelength of the UVA varies between 320 to 400 nanometer, and it is associated with photoaging, tanning, and photodermatosis such as PMLE or polymorphic light eruption. It is also responsible for immunosuppression and photocarcinogenesis. Since UVA, it is not directly absorbed by the various biological targets, so it penetrates deeper than the UVB radiation. While the UVB, it is absorbed by the biological targets and hence it is not able to penetrate deeper into the skin. UVB, on the other hand, the wavelength varies between 290 to 320 nanometer, causes more damage than UVA radiation. So there are two types of damage, one caused after acute exposure and the one caused by the long-term or chronic exposure. The acute exposure leads to sunburn, while a more chronic type of exposure results in cancer because it exerts direct effect on the DNA and the proteins of the cell. When is the highest amount of UVB that is received by us? So when the sun is directly overhead, that is at the noontime or might be at the equator, when in high altitude, more amount of UVB is received. So coming back to the topic proper, that is sunscreen. As I told you, it is a means for topical photo protection. And what does what is the main purpose of photo protection? Ideally, it protects us from the harmful effects of the UV radiation. But what is complete topical photo protection? So if there is sunscreen that protects us from UVB, UVA, and also the harmful effects of infrared radiation, then that sunscreen is said to provide complete photo protection. Now, new sunscreens have come into the market that also protects us from the blue light. Now, what is blue light? Blue light, it is a light which is emitted by the gadgets, for example, our mobiles, our laptops, etc. And it has a tendency to penetrate deeper than the UVA radiation as well. So this is what complete photo protection is all about. Talking about the sunscreen, there are two types of sunscreen, the chemical, which is the organic sunscreen, and the physical, which is the inorganic sunscreen. So first we will be studying about the chemical sunscreen. What are chemical sunscreens? They are aromatic compounds conjugated with a carbonyl group. Now, these chemical sunscreens, how do they act? They act by absorbing high energy UV radiation and then they release them as low energy rays, thus preventing them from reaching and damaging the skin. So, what they're doing, they are absorbing the high energy radiation and then they are releasing them as low energy rays. When this exposed to UV light, the sunscreen undergoes a photostable reaction, except for a component which is avobenzone, which is photo unstable. So other ingredients they undergo a photostable reaction, which allows it to retain its UV absorbing potency without causing any significant photo degradation. That means it is able to maintain its property of UV protection and at the same time it is not getting disintegrated into other products. Talking about the various types of UV filters, there are two types of UV filters, UVB and UVA filters. So UVB filters, as the name suggests, they protect us mostly from the UVB radiation, and UVA filters, they protect us from UVA radiation. What are the different types of UVB filters? The first one is the PABA. So it usually provides protection in between the wavelength of 290 to 310 nanometer. In fact, it was the first sunscreen to be widely available. But the problem with PABA derivatives is that they have an alcoholic base and it is associated with staining and allergic contact dermatitis. Pyramid O, it is the most potent FDA-approved UVB absorber. It has got less adverse effects. The second one are the cinnamides. So cinnamides are the octinoxate or octyl methoxycinnamide. It provides protection in about 311 at around 311 nanometer. And in fact, it's the most frequently used sunscreen ingredient. Most of the sunscreens will have OMC, which is the octyl methoxycinnamide. It has almost replaced PABA now. Then the third one is octisalate or the salicylate. So octyl salicylate or octisalate, these are basically different types of salicylates, and it provides protection at around 307 nanometer. Now, it is not the principal or the main UVB absorber. It is a weak UVB absorber. So, how does it find its use in sunscreen? Basically, what it does is that it augments the UVB protection in sunscreen. So it is not the main UVB absorber, but it augments the UVB absorption in the sunscreen. So that is why it is used in combination with the other UVB filter. It has got a good safety profile. Then octocrylene. Octocrylene, it is used in combination with the other UVB absorbers, and it is used to achieve higher SPF formulation. There's another product or another UVB filter, which is insulisol. So it is phenyl benz imidazole sulfonic acid. What is the property of insulisol? It is basically water soluble. So if we are prescribing a sunscreen to a person who is, activities like swimming, etc., or maybe he sweats a lot. So the sunscreen containing ensilisol is probably not a good choice for him because this particular ingredient, it is water soluble. Now coming to the various UVA filters, the UVA filters are primarily the benzophenanes. Now benzophenanes not only it provides protection from UVA radiation, but also slightly from UVB radiation as well. So that is why, because it is covering both the ranges, UVB as well as UVA, that means it is a broad spectrum sunscreen. Those sunscreens which provide protection from both types of UV radiation, UVA and B, those sunscreens are broad spectrum sunscreen. So benzophenanes, they are one of the components for the same. They include oxybenzone, silicybenzole, and dioxybenzone. But what is the problem with these benzones, etc.? The disadvantage is that it has got poor substantivity. So what do you mean by substantivity? Substantivity is the property of the sunscreen to maintain its efficacy even when exposed to adverse situations or adverse conditions. What are the adverse conditions that we are talking about? Increased sweating or increased water activity. Okay. But the disadvantage is that UVA filter, particularly the benzophenone, it has poor substantivity. Apart from that, it is also absorbed systemically, and oxybenzone is the UVA filter which has got the highest incidence of contact dermatitis. It is not at all photostable. Then anthranilides. Anthranilides or the methyl anthranilate, which is also known as miragenate, it absorbs primarily near the UVA range and it is a weak UVB absorber. If we talk about the avobenzone, basically it provides protection in the UVA range, but it is photo unstable. We've talked about this thing in the previous slides as well. Basically, photo unstable, that means it disintegrates on exposure to the UV radiation. That is why it cannot be used alone. So what it is mixed with? It is mixed with inorganic filters or octocrylene to provide it stability. If we talk about the broad spectrum filters, which provide, protection from both UVA and UVB, these are the following options which are available. A capsule, which is also known as myroxyl S6, and it basically provides protection in between 290 to 390 nanometers. So that gives it a broad range. with peak absorption at around 345 nanometer. In fact, Ecamsil is FDA approved and it has been patented by L'Oreal. But what is the problem with Ecamsil? Just like ensilisol, it is water soluble and hence it is less water resistant. The other ones include Tinesob M, which is a combination of organic and inorganic sunscreen. Then Silatriol, which is Minoxidil XX, and Tinesob S. So these are the various broad spectrum filters which are available. Talking about the inorganic sunscreen or the physical blockers. So in physical blockers, they have a tendency to reflect or scatter UV radiation, while the organic sunscreens or the chemical sunscreen, what was their mechanism of action? It used to absorb the high radiation energy and then emit lower energy radiation. But physical blockers, what do? They basically reflect and scatter the UV radiation. It is opaque. It leaves a whitening effect. But nowadays, this thing has been minimized to quite some extent by using micronized or ultrafine particles. These physical blockers, because the mechanism of action is, scattering. So that's why it is used primarily in the broad spectrum protection. It is chemical stable and does not cause contact dermatitis. What are the various agents which can be used as physical blockers for UV radiation? These include titanium dioxide, zinc oxide, ferrous oxide, talc, calamine, ectamol, kaolin. So, what are the characteristics of an ideal sunscreen? An ideal sunscreen should be a combination of both physical and chemical agent. It should be broad spectrum. It should be cosmetically elegant. Should not leave behind a lot of white cast. It should be substantive. That means it should have the ability to maintain its efficacy even when exposed to adverse conditions. Should be non-irritant. Should not cause allergies. And obviously, it should be non-comedogenic, or else it can result in acneiform eruption. And obviously, it should be economical because there are sunscreens used. And now, basically, sunscreens have become very popular, and patients have, or general public has started using it quite often. But the predominant indications include sunburn, freckling, discoloration, photoaging. If the patient has a tendency of developing skin cancer, is living in such areas, for example, Australia, etc., where the ozone layer has been depleted, or basically, those patients who already have skin cancer, those having phototoxic or photoallergic reactions. In case of photosensitivity diseases such as PMLE, chronic actinic dermatitis, lupus erythematosus, xeroderma pigmentosum, PIH, etc. These were all about topical sunscreens, but there's a category of systemic sunscreens as well. So, what are systemic sunscreen? Basically, just systemic agents, systemic photoprotective agents. What are the different systemic photoprotective agents? These are ascorbic acid, aspirin, indomethacin, selenium, green tea polyphenols, tocopherol, antimalarials, etc. Prescribing sunscreen to the patients should know about certain indices related with the sunscreen. These include sun protecting factor. What is sun protecting factor? It is basically the SPF that we are talking about. So what is SPF? The ratio of the least amount of UVB which is required to produce minimal erythema on sun protected skin to the amount of the energy required to produce the same erythema on photo unprotected skin. That means we have to compare the different doses of the UVB which is required to produce erythema first on which on the skin on which sunscreen has been applied, and then on the skin on which sunscreen has not been applied. UVB is almost around 1,000 times more erythemogenic than UVA, and SPF largely measure basically the UVB, the protection against UVB. So since we are measuring the erythemogenic potential of the UV radiation, which is mostly caused by the UVB, that is why SPF is a measure of protection against UVB radiation. Depending upon its SPF, it has been divided into low, medium, high, and highest. So high includes 30 to 50, highest includes sunscreens having SPF more than 50. But in time, we need to prescribe a sunscreen which has minimum SPF of 30. A sunscreen less than 30 SPF won't be as effective. Substantivity. This we have already talked about. That is the ability of the sunscreen to maintain efficacy and withstand adverse conditions such as exposure to water or sweat. Water resistant. It protects up to 40 minutes of water exposure, and that means 220 minutes activity interval. While very water resistant, they provide protection for up to 80 minutes of water exposure. That is 420 minutes of activity interval. Together, water resistant and very water resistant, they are grouped together as sweat resistant. This was about UVB protection factor. Now let us learn about the UVA protection factor. So unlike UVB protection factor, which measures the erythema potential, here we are looking at the persistent pigment darkening. So UVA dose that induces the persistent pigment darkening 2 to 24 hours after exposure in sun-protected skin to that in an unprotected skin. So here we are looking for the persistent pigment darkening. There are other methods also or other standards also available to measure the UVA radiation, basically the protection against the UVA radiation, which include the Australian and the New Zealand standard. And then there is European Union guideline. So what is European Union guideline? UVA protection factor, which is about 1/3 of the SPF. Then we have immune protection factor. What is immune protection factor? It is the ability of the sunscreen to prevent UV or UV radiation induced immunosuppression. If you remember from the previous slides, immunosuppression is caused by UVA radiation. So again, immune protection factor, it is considered to be a protective factor against UVA radiation. So how it is assessed? It is assessed by the ability of the sunscreen to inhibit either sensitization or elicitation arm of contact or delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction to allergens such as DNCB and nickel. We should also know about critical wavelength. Critical wavelength below which 90% of the sunscreen UV absorbency occurs. So broad spectrum sunscreen, they usually have a critical wavelength of more than 370 nanometers. That means 90% of the wavelength below this level, 370 nanometer, will be absorbed by broad spectrum sunscreen. Sunscreens cannot be used in conditions. For example, if a patient is known to be sensitive to sunscreen, yes, there are patients like that. In fact, it can sometimes induce photosensitivity as well. In those patients, sunscreen should not be prescribed and should be avoided. Infants less than 6 months, it's available in the form of cream, emulsion, sprays, sticks, reactions associated with sunscreen. So adverse reactions include irritation, contact urticaria, contact dermatitis, both irritant as well as allergic contact dermatitis, photosensitivity, and acnegenicity. Some of the sunscreen can actually result in acne-form eruptions, and in those patients, it is preferable to we should prefer using gel-based sunscreen which are having non-comedogenic effects. What are the various recommendations for sunscreen application? Now, this is a very important topic because there's a lot of stuff on Instagram, YouTube, etc. By application density, that is what is the amount of sunscreen which is required to be applied by an average adult. So, to cover the whole full body, around 35 ml of sunscreen is required. I'm talking about the full body. And when it should be applied? So, sunscreen should be ideally applied. The first coat should be applied half an hour before the person steps out of his or her home. Then a second application should be, after 20 minutes or 10 minutes before leaving the house. So first 30 minutes before leaving the house and then again 10 minutes before leaving the house. Ideally, sunscreen should be reapplied after every 2 hours, and every patient, is having an activity-filled day. For example, when he's sweating a lot, or when the patient is going for a swimming. In that case, sunscreen should be applied even more frequently. The application should be done after swimming, sweating, or any other rigorous activity. But if we talk about real life scenario, it is very difficult to reapply sunscreen after every 2 hours. So what we usually recommend is that we have recommend a reapplication after every 3 to 4 hours. For example, 7 a.m., 11 a.m., 3 p.m. or 8 a.m., 12 noon, 4 p.m. So basically after 3 to 4 hours till the time sun is there. So that should suffice for most of the patients. So what is teaspoon rule? Teaspoon rule is basically it gives as an approximate idea about how much sunscreen should be applied by the patient. Around 3 ml should be applied for each arm, for the face and the neck, and around 6 ml, which is slightly more than a teaspoon, for each leg, for chest, and the back. So this gives an approx idea to the patient regarding the exact amount of sunscreen they need to apply over the different body parts. Sunscreens have undergone a lot of evolution and still it is undergoing a lot of evolution. So what are the newer technologies that are associated with the same? These are sunsphere and microencapsulation. What are sunspheres? So basically, these are acrylate foam polymers that do not absorb the UV radiation, but it enhances the efficacy or effectiveness of the active sunscreen ingredient. That is why spheres are being used to boost the SPF. It can be, available in powder form, and it can boost the SPF by about 50 to 70%. Microencapsulation is basically encapsulation of the active ingredient of the sunscreen in a silica shell, which reduces the chances of allergic and irritant contact dermatitis without the loss of the efficacy. There are certain controversies surrounding the sunscreen. First of all, what is the age group after which the sunscreen should be applied by the patient? So, as I told you, it should be avoided in infants less than 6 months of age. After that, yes, it can be applied. PABA was considered to be mutagenic by some of the scientists, but as we have talked about it previously also, that PABA has been mostly replaced and mostly OMC is the key ingredient in most of the sunscreens. And vitamin D synthesis. So if we apply sunscreen very quickly, some scientists believe that we can develop vitamin D deficiency. That otherwise also somehow most of us are having, I don't know, even if we are not applying the sunscreen. So basically, so what can be done might be thrice in a week or twice in a week, the patient can expose his or her hands to the sun for, vitamin D synthesis in the body. Otherwise, there is not much deficiency which is created by sunscreen application. Okay, so these are the controversies which are surrounding the sunscreen. Now, before ending the talk, I would like to discuss about one sunscreen, and I'm going to read the ingredients and discuss with you what kind of sunscreen is this. So I'm not going to read all the ingredients such as glycerine, etc. The main ingredients I will be reading. Okay. So it has it got dimethicone. It has got a kind of salicylate. So salicylate, these are UVB absorbers. So these are these UVB absorbers. Then there is titanium dioxide. So titanium dioxide is a physical sunscreen. That means it is combination sunscreen, a combination of organic and inorganic sunscreen. And obviously, it is broad spectrum because it is offering, first of all, it contains a physical agent, for example, the titanium dioxide, which is mostly scattering the UV radiation. Plus, it is also providing protection from UVB, weak protection by because of the presence of the salicylate. It also contains methoxycinnamide or OMC. So, OMC is again one of the most important UVB absorb component of chemical sunscreen. Then it also contains silica. So basically, what I'll repeat the ingredients for you. It contains salicylates, it contains OMC, it contains titanium dioxide, and it also contains silica. So basically, it is a combination of organic and inorganic sunscreen, that is a chemical and a physical sunscreen, and it is providing protection from both UVB as well as UVA. That means it is a broad spectrum sunscreen. Okay. If we talk about the SPF is around 50. That means 50 times more UVB radiation will be required in a sunscreen protected skin rather than an unprotected skin to develop erythema. If you like our lecture, please connect with us for more lectures. We have lectures on basics in dermatology, immunobullous disorders, leprosy, sexually transmitted diseases, and connective tissue disorders, papillary formic disorders as well. And I'm sure you will like our lectures too. Thank you for watching.